When Lena and I decided to plan a surprise birthday road trip for our mutual friend Sam, it felt like the kind of epic thing that would go down in our group's history. We were giddy with ideas. Scenic routes, quirky pit stops, a cozy cabin with a fireplace. It was going to be perfect. But instead of getting down to the nitty-gritty right away, we split up responsibilities like a couple of amateurs at a middle school group project. I took logistics, booking the cabin, renting the car, and mapping the route. Lena got the fun stuff: food, drinks, decorations, and activities. Sam's birthday was 3 weeks away, and we had a whole spreadsheet to stay organized. Easy peasy. Except, I wasn't really a spreadsheet person. By week 2, I had done a cursory Google search for cabins but felt overwhelmed by options. Most were either booked, outrageously expensive, or had reviews like beautiful views, but we found a scorpion in the bed. So, I did what any responsible adult would do. I closed the tab and told myself I'd revisit it tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into the day after, which turned into the weekend, which turned into Lena texting me, "How's the cabin search going?" Still narrowing it down. I lied. Technically not a lie. I was narrowing it down to no effort whatsoever, but it was fine. I had time. And Lena? Lena was the queen of parties. She'd take care of everything else. The night before we were supposed to leave, Lena and I met up to finalize the plan. I was expecting her to roll in with a car full of snacks and surprises, maybe even a handmade birthday banner because she's overachieving like that. Instead, she showed up holding a single grocery bag containing a 6-pack of off-brand soda and a pack of half-melted candles. "What is this?" I asked, laughing nervously. "Where's all the other stuff?" "Other stuff?" Lena looked genuinely puzzled. "I thought you were handling, like, half of it." "No," I said slowly, the anxiety rising in my chest. "You were doing food, drinks, and decorations." "Yeah, I got soda and candles," she said defensively. "I thought you were getting the cake, though." "I wasn't getting the cake," I snapped. "I was doing the cabin and the route." "Oh, good," she said with relief. "Where's the cabin, then?" It was like time stopped. I froze, staring at her, willing my brain to generate an answer that wouldn't make me sound like the complete failure I was. I began eloquently, "I'm still finalizing it." "What?" she shrieked. "We're leaving tomorrow." I know. I've got it narrowed down." I lied again, fully committing to the bit. "I just need to book it tonight." "Tonight?" Lena threw her hands in the air. "Why didn't you do this earlier?" "I've been busy." I shot back. "Why didn't you bring anything besides warm soda and candles?" She glared at me, incredulous. "I'm not the one who volunteered to plan the actual trip. You said you'd handle it, but clearly—" "Oh, come on. I didn't see you planning activities or snacks either. Don't act like you're blameless." At this point, we were full-on bickering like an old married couple. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized Sam's supposed epic birthday road trip was hanging by a thread, but I was too irritated to care. Lena was stubborn, I was stubborn, and neither of us was budging. After about 10 minutes of this, Lena said, "Fine, let's just look everything up now and figure it out." So we did. Or at least we tried. We started with the cabin search, scrolling through endless listings, each one worse than the last. Too small, too expensive, too far away, too weird. Is it just me? Or does this one have a mural of clowns in the living room? Finally, we found one that seemed decent, until we realized it was a yurt. "No way," Lena said flatly. "If I have to pee in the woods, I'm canceling my friendship with both of you." "Okay, fine. No yurts," I muttered, panic now fully setting in. Next, we tried brainstorming activities. "What about a hike?" Lena suggested. "It's supposed to rain," I pointed out. "Bowling? That's not exactly epic." "A local vineyard?" "Sam doesn't drink wine." The clock was ticking and our plan, or lack thereof, was falling apart in real time. Finally, Lena threw her hands up. "You know what? Screw it. Let's just wing it." "Wing it?" I repeated, horrified. "We can't wing a road trip?" "Well, we clearly can't plan one either," she snapped. When the morning rolled around, We showed up at Sam's door with the energy of two people walking into an exam we hadn't studied for. Sam was thrilled, completely unaware of the chaos brewing beneath the surface. We loaded into the rental car I had managed to secure at the last minute and set off on what can only be described as the most awkward, underwhelming road trip in human history. The quirky pit stops we had envisioned turned out to be a gas station with a broken slushy machine and a weird roadside museum dedicated to salt shakers. Lunch was convenience store sandwiches. By the time we got to the cabin, a cramped Airbnb that smelled faintly of mildew, we were exhausted, cranky, and out of excuses. Sam, bless him, was still smiling. "You guys did all this for me?" he said, genuinely touched. Lena and I exchanged a look that was equal parts guilt and mutual resentment. We were officially the worst party planners of all time. That night, as Sam fell asleep in a creaky twin bed, Lena and I sat outside on the cabin's tiny porch, wrapped in blankets, nursing warm sodas. Neither of us wanted to admit how badly we'd screwed up. "I can't believe you didn't book the cabin," Lena said finally. "I can't believe you showed up with melted candles," I shot back. Silence stretched between us, heavy with blame and exhaustion. Finally, I muttered, "Do you think Sam knows how much we winged this?" Lena laughed bitterly. "He probably thinks we planned the Salt Shaker Museum on purpose. So now I have to ask, AITA? It started with a box of macarons. Well, technically, it started with Amelia's text, but the macarons were the tipping point. "How do you feel about doing something special for your dad's retirement party?" she'd written, accompanied by 3 confetti emojis and a gif of fireworks. I'd stared at the screen, chewing my lip. My dad, the man who kept a stash of emergency pocket squares and used words like perfunctory in casual conversation, did not strike me as a fireworks kind of guy. Still, I loved the idea. Dad deserved a celebration. 35 years of being a surgeon, a mentor, and a person who tolerated my endless existential crises deserved at least one night of unfiltered joy. Special sounded perfect, until we tried to define it. We met at the kitchen table the next morning, armed with coffee and notepads like generals plotting a campaign. Amelia kicked things off by sliding the macaron box toward me. "These are for inspiration," she said, all sunshine and optimism. I popped a pistachio one into my mouth, instantly suspicious. People don't bribe you with pastries unless they're about to pitch something wild. "So," she began, clasping her hands together like she was about to sell me a timeshare. "What if we rented out that art gallery downtown? You know, the one with the big skylights? We could get a jazz band, some caterers, and maybe even an artist doing live sketches of the guests. Dad loves art, right?" I choked on my coffee. "Amelia, Dad has 2 paintings in his house, and one of them is a framed jigsaw puzzle. Are you sure we're talking about the same person?" She blinked at me, undeterred. "Okay, so maybe not a gallery, but he deserves something classy, something he'll remember." I was already shaking my head. "He's not that guy. He hates being fussed over. Remember when we threw him that birthday brunch, and he left halfway through to clean the gutters? We need to keep it simple, or he'll find a way to accidentally miss his own party." Amelia frowned, flipping through her notebook. "So what's your idea?" "Something low-key," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Like a barbecue. Just a few close friends and family, some beers, burgers, maybe a fire pit. He loves that stuff." Her nose scrunched like I just suggested we host it in a gas station parking lot. "A barbecue? For his retirement? That's not special. That's Thursday." "No, it's him," I countered. "It's what he likes. He's not about jazz bands and caterers. He's about overcooking steaks and telling dad jokes." We went back and forth like that for nearly an hour, and by the time the coffee pot was empty, we were no closer to a solution. I argued that a big, elaborate party would make him uncomfortable. Amelia argued that my minimalist backyard hangout was borderline insulting for someone who just spent 3 decades saving lives. "Fine," she said at last, pushing her chair back with a dramatic sigh. "If you want to give him a charred hot dog and call it a day, be my guest. But don't blame me when he's disappointed." "He won't be disappointed," I said through gritted teeth. "He'll be relieved." We called a truce after that, but it was a tense one. Over the next few days, We both started gathering intel, Amelia by dropping not-so-subtle hints to Dad. If you could celebrate anywhere, where would it be? And me by scouring his calendar for clues about what he actually wanted. Neither of us got much to work with. The breakthrough came when I accidentally stumbled on his old vinyl collection in the attic. Dusty and forgotten, it was filled with records he hadn't touched in years. Ella Fitzgerald, Miles Davis, Nat King Cole. I stared at them, a half-formed idea taking shape in my mind. When I floated it to Amelia, she actually paused mid-eye roll, which I took as a good sign. So, a backyard barbecue, she said slowly, but with live jazz? Like a tiny concert? Exactly, I said, trying to contain my excitement. We can string up some lights, make it feel intimate but still special, and we'll keep it a surprise, so he doesn't have time to overthink it. Amelia considered this, chewing the inside of her cheek. Okay, she said finally, but only if we do one other thing. What? She grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. A secret roast. You know, speeches, stories, a little light embarrassment. I groaned. You know he hates being the center of attention. Exactly, she said, her grin widening. It'll be hilarious. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the party, everything came together almost perfectly. The backyard was transformed with twinkling lights and mismatched chairs. The band we hired set up in the corner, and the smell of grilled steak filled the air. Dad arrived thinking he was just coming over to help me fix the fence. And his face when he saw the setup was priceless. A mix of bewilderment and begrudging amusement. I knew you two were up to something, he muttered as Amelia handed him a beer. But there was no hiding the smile that crept onto his face when the band started playing. By the time the speeches started, he was relaxed enough to laugh at himself. People shared stories about his terrible fashion sense, his habit of quoting Shakespeare at wildly inappropriate times, and the infamous camping trip where he'd accidentally burned all the marshmallows before anyone had even had one. All right, Dad said at last, holding up his hands as the laughter died down. You've had your fun, but really, thank you. This is perfect. And it was. Even Amelia admitted it as we cleaned up afterward. You were right, she said, leaning on the broom handle. Sometimes less is more. I smirked, but before I could gloat, she added, but I was also right. The roast killed. We both laughed, and for once, there was no need to keep score. Still, as I think about it now, I can't help wondering, AITA? The moment the credits rolled on yet another, what do we watch tonight? Disaster. I realized we were in trouble. This wasn't just a choice about TV anymore. It had turned into a kind of philosophical battleground between me and my partner, Maddie. She, a self-proclaimed connoisseur of joy and comfort, was dead set on finding something light and breezy, like a hammock for your soul. Meanwhile, I craved complexity, narratives so tangled and dark that they practically required a whiteboard and therapy after every episode. Our living room had become neutral territory. The soft glow of fairy lights above the couch betrayed none of the tension brewing beneath them. I sprawled out on one end with my laptop, while Maddie perched on the armrest like a judge presiding over a trial. Between us, the remote, the weapon of mass indecision. Okay, hear me out, Maddie began, tilting the remote at me as though proposing a toast. Love sprinkles. It's about a baker who... No, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm not watching a show called Love Sprinkles. It sounds like diabetes in HD. Maddie gasped in mock horror. You didn't even let me finish. It's about a baker who inherits a struggling cupcake shop and finds love in the... Please stop, I begged, waving her off. I can literally feel my teeth rotting from the plot. She crossed her arms. Fine. What's your genius suggestion? Oh, dark one? I smirked and pulled up the trailer for The Labyrinths of Midnight. The opening scene. A lone detective stumbling into an abandoned subway station, the walls covered in cryptic graffiti, already had me buzzing with excitement. This, twists, betrayal, morally gray characters, everything you could ever want. Maddie leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Why is everything so damp? It's atmospheric, I argued. It pulls you in. It's moldy, she countered. I feel like I can smell that guy through the screen. We sat in silence, the trailer's ominous music underscoring the divide between us. I could tell Maddie wasn't just disinterested. She was recoiling. It was like offering someone a fine wine and watching them spit it out because it tasted weird. This isn't working, I sighed, slumping back into the couch. We're never going to find something we both like. Maddie didn't respond immediately. Instead, she started scrolling with the kind of intensity usually reserved for finding cheap flights. What if, she said slowly, we didn't have to pick? What do you mean? She set the remote down and leaned forward, her expression equal parts mischievous and serious. What if we treated this like an experiment? We each pick something the other would never choose, and we have to watch the first episode. No complaints. No skipping. I blinked at her. So, like, you'd watch one of my bleak psychological thrillers, and I'd, what? Watch a pastel-colored rom-com where the biggest problem is who gets the last croissant. Exactly, she said, her eyes gleaming. We swap perspectives. Maybe we even learn something. I wanted to say no. I really wanted to say no. But there was something about her enthusiasm, the way she seemed genuinely curious, that made me hesitate. Fine, I said, extending a hand. But if you fall asleep during labyrinths of midnight, I'm never letting you live it down. And if you cry over love sprinkles, I'll make sure to have tissues ready, she shot back, shaking my hand firmly. The experiment began that very night. We started with love sprinkles, because of course we did. The opening credits were exactly what I feared. Soft acoustic guitar, cheerful montages of cupcakes being frosted, and the protagonist, an impossibly perky redhead, narrating about following her dreams. I braced myself for 90 minutes of eye-rolling agony. But then something weird happened. Somewhere between the cupcake disaster montage and the meet-cute with the grumpy coffee shop owner, I laughed. Out loud. The jokes weren't terrible, and the characters had this earnest charm that caught me off guard. By the time the episode ended, I was begrudgingly curious about what would happen next. Maddie, of course, noticed. You liked it, she teased, poking me in the ribs. I didn't like it, I lied, trying to sound aloof. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I saw you smiling when she dropped that giant mixing bowl. That was a physics error, not a joke. Maddie wasn't buying it, but she didn't press further. It was her turn to watch my pick, and I was ready for revenge. She sat cross-legged as labyrinths of midnight began, her expression already skeptical. The dim lighting and grim dialogue did nothing to win her over in the first 5 minutes, but by minute 15, she was perched on the edge of the couch. Wait, she said, pointing at the screen. Did he just lie to her? Why? He's supposed to be the good guy. Is he, though? I asked smugly. Keep watching. By the end of the episode, she was gripping a throw pillow like it was a life preserver. When the credits rolled, she turned to me, her mouth open as if to speak, then closed it again. Finally, she said, I hate how much I want to know what happens next. Welcome to my world, I said, feeling triumphant. For the next few weeks, our nights turned into a strange, wonderful dance of contradictions. One evening, we'd swoon over slow-burn romances and perfectly executed comedic timing. The next, we'd sit in silence, our minds racing to unravel complex webs of deceit and mystery. It wasn't just about the shows anymore. It was about seeing each other in a new light. I started to understand why Maddie craved simplicity after her hectic workdays, just as she began to appreciate the catharsis I found in confronting the darker corners of storytelling. Eventually, we found our middle ground in a show neither of us expected to like, a quirky murder mystery set in a small town. It had sharp humor for her and intricate plotting for me, and somehow, it just worked. As we settled into our routine, I realized this wasn't really about TV at all. It was about finding joy in the act of sharing, of stepping into someone else's shoes for a while, even if those shoes were covered in blood or powdered sugar. So now I'm wondering, AITA? When Jake first suggested getting a pet, I thought he was kidding. We were standing in the middle of a department store, me holding a discount blender and him inspecting a lamp that looked like a 1970s alien artifact. We should get a pet, he said casually, as though it were a totally reasonable thing to say while holding a lamp shaped like a crescent moon. I laughed. Sure, let's get a dragon while we're at it. He grinned. I was thinking more like a cat. A cat? I almost dropped the blender. What happened to you not being a pet person? You didn't even want a houseplant when we moved in. Houseplants don't purr, he said with a shrug. Then he added, almost too quickly, unless you want something else, like a dog. My heart skipped. A dog. Finally. I dreamed of having one since I was a kid. Long walks, wild games of fetch, its goofy grin greeting me every time I came home. Wait, are you serious? I asked. As serious as a moon lamp, he said, giving the thing a little shake. That's how it began, with Jake imagining a sleek, elegant cat curled up on a sunny windowsill, and me picturing a big, slobbery dog bounding through the park. We left the store with the blender and no resolution, but the idea stuck. Over the next week, it became all we talked about: pets, dogs versus cats, responsibility versus reward, energy versus calm. It started to feel less like a light-hearted discussion and more like a chess game where each piece carried hidden emotional stakes. For Jake, cats represented ease, elegance, and, most importantly, familiarity. He'd grown up with them. He described one named Marzipan, who used to sleep on his chest like a furry little dictator. Cats have boundaries, he said one night while we scrolled through adoption sites on the couch. They don't demand anything from you. They just exist in your space. It's comforting. For me, a dog wasn't just a pet. It was a promise. A childhood fantasy I could finally make real. Growing up, my mom was always working, and I'd spent too many afternoons alone, dreaming of a four-legged friend who'd keep me company. Dogs are loyal, I argued. They're like a built-in best friend. You can't get that from a cat. Jake smirked. You don't need a best friend. You've got me. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. Yeah, but you don't wag your tail when I come home. Give me enough snacks and I might. We tried to compromise. We really did. At one point, Jake suggested we get a lizard. They're cool, low maintenance, and they don't have fur, he said, as though that was the world's most compelling sales pitch. No offense, I replied, but I need a pet that can recognize my existence. Okay, fair, he admitted. Then he suggested a bird. I shot him a look. What? Birds are fun. And some of them talk. Yeah, I said, and some of them live 60 years. I don't want to be in my 80s teaching a parrot how to swear. We even visited a pet store, just to browse. Bad idea. Jake made a beeline for the cats, cooing at a sleepy tabby while I gravitated toward the dog section, where a gangly mutt with floppy ears pressed its nose against the glass. I knelt down, and it wagged its tail so hard. Its whole body wiggled. This one, I whispered, already in love. Absolutely not, Jake said when he saw it. It's practically a horse. Do you want it stomping all over our couch? It's not that big, I countered, but the mutt chose that moment to let out a bark so loud it startled a nearby guinea pig. We left the store empty-handed, our debate unresolved. But the turning point came one Saturday morning when we decided to visit an animal rescue center, thinking maybe seeing the animals in person would help us decide. A volunteer led us to the dog zone first. Jake was stiff, keeping his hands jammed in his pockets while I crouched to let an energetic border collie sniff my fingers. Look at her, I said, my voice full of hope. She's perfect. Jake didn't answer. He was staring at a cat perched on a nearby counter, its sleek black fur shining in the sunlight. The cat yawned, stretched, and then leapt gracefully to the ground, padding over to rub against his legs. Jake crouched, his eyes softening. Hey there, little guy, he murmured, scratching behind its ears. Traitor, I teased. But he didn't even look up. Then it happened. The cat jumped onto Jake's lap, purring like a tiny engine. At the exact same moment, the border collie barked and nudged its head under my hand, its tail wagging furiously. Jake and I looked at each other, both of us smiling, both of us completely, utterly stuck. The volunteer must have sensed our dilemma because she said, you know, sometimes cats and dogs do really well together. Jake raised an eyebrow. You mean both? I laughed, half in disbelief. That's insane. We can't have both. It'd be chaos. Or balance, Jake countered, grinning. It was a wild idea. Ridiculous, even. But as I watched Jake with the cat and felt the border collie's warm breath against my hand, I realized it might just be the perfect solution. Could we really do it? Could we handle both? Now we're sitting on the couch, the adoption forms in front of us, the dog asleep at my feet and the cat curled up on Jake's lap. And honestly, I can't tell if we've made the best decision of our lives or the worst. AITA? It started with a knock at my door. Not the polite, tap-tap kind you'd expect from a neighbor borrowing sugar or the postman delivering a parcel, but an insistent, almost frantic rapping that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:37 a.m. Nothing good ever comes at that hour. I hesitated. My first instinct was to ignore it, but then came the voice, muffled yet urgent. Mr. Keene? Please, I need your help. No one called me Mr. Keene anymore. Not since I'd left teaching 5 years ago. Not since everything fell apart. I peered through the peephole, my breath catching when I saw a woman, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, shivering on my porch. Against better judgment, I unlatched the door. Who are you? I asked, my voice rough with the weight of interrupted sleep. Your student, she said, her lips trembling. Or, I was. It's complicated. You don't recognize me? The thing is, I didn't. She was young, maybe early 20s, but there was something timeless about her eyes, as though they held secrets older than either of us. And yet, something about her was eerily familiar, like the ghost of a dream you can't quite recall. Before I could press further, she pushed past me into the house, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor. You have to come with me, she said, urgency radiating off her. There isn't much time. For what? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She turned to me, her expression caught between fear and determination. To fix it. I stood there, torn between calling the police or indulging this strange apparition in my living room. Fix what? I finally asked, my curiosity winning out. Your mistake, she said simply, as if that explained everything. She wouldn't elaborate further, not even when I pressed. Instead, she handed me a pair of shoes and told me to follow her. Against every ounce of logic, I did. We walked into the night, her leading the way through streets that seemed to stretch and twist in ways they never had before. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun, and the air grew heavy with a mist that clung to my skin like cobwebs. After what felt like hours, we reached a park I didn't recognize. In its center stood a lone bench beneath a massive oak tree whose branches seemed to cradle the moon. And there, sitting on the bench, was my son. Except it couldn't be him. My son had been dead for 3 years. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Sam? I managed to whisper. He looked up, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had tilted on its axis. He was older than I remembered, his face sharper, his posture more assured. But his eyes, the eyes of a boy who used to challenge me at chess and laugh at my terrible jokes, those hadn't changed. Dad, he said, his voice steady, as if he'd been expecting me. I took a step closer, then another, until I was standing in front of him. How? I couldn't finish the question. There's no time for that, the girl interrupted, her voice cutting through the fog of my disbelief. You need to listen to him. Sam stood, his expression serious. You have to make a choice, he said, his words deliberate. One that changes everything. What choice? I asked, my head spinning. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. On one side was an image of a tree, on the other, a key. He handed it to me. Flip it. I hesitated. What happens if I do? He smiled, a bittersweet curve of his lips. That depends on what you believe. I looked at the coin, its surface glinting in the moonlight. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, to hold him, to demand an explanation for this impossible reunion. But something in his expression stopped me. This wasn't about understanding. It was about trust. I flipped the coin. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world held its breath. The coin spun through the air, catching the light in dizzying flashes, before landing in my palm. It was the tree. The moment I saw it, the ground beneath me seemed to dissolve. I felt myself falling, not down but through, as though I were slipping between the seams of reality. Colors blurred, sounds distorted, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in my old classroom. The clock on the wall read 3:15 p.m., and sunlight streamed through the windows. The room smelled of chalk and paper, a smell I hadn't realized I missed. At the front of the class stood Sam, 15 years old, his backpack slung lazily over one shoulder. He was laughing at something one of his friends said, his face lit with the easy joy of someone who had his whole life ahead of him. "Dad," he said, noticing me. His expression shifted to confusion. "What are you doing here?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know how I'd gotten there or what it meant. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He was alive, and that was enough. And then, like a whisper carried away by the wind, a voice echoed in my mind. The voice of the girl who had led me here. "This is your second chance. Don't waste it." My cousin Ella had been unrecognizable lately. Normally, she was the kind of person who could make waiting in line at the DMV feel like a carnival with her knack for cracking jokes and befriending strangers. But ever since she'd lost her job, she'd been a shadow of herself, quiet, withdrawn, and worst of all, humorless. I missed her, and I hated seeing her like that. I knew I couldn't fix her situation, but I figured I could at least give her one night of fun, something to remind her of the Ella who used to light up a room. Ella had always been obsessed with those murder mystery dinners, the kind where everyone dresses up, acts out a role, and tries to figure out who done it. She'd been raving about one in particular for months, but it had sold out before she could buy tickets. So, I thought, why not bring the murder mystery to her? I spent 2 weeks planning. I roped in our mutual friends, assigned everyone roles, and even hired a local improv actor to play the detective. I transformed my living room into a smoky 1920s speakeasy with rented props and vintage jazz humming from a hidden Bluetooth speaker. I spent hours crafting the perfect mystery plot, complete with clues and a shocking twist ending. I even catered the whole thing, making sure to include Ella's favorite snacks, cheddar popcorn, gummy bears, and those overpriced mocktails she always ordered for the aesthetic. The piece de resistance? Ella was going to be the detective. I figured it'd give her a sense of control in a world that probably felt like chaos lately. She'd get to solve the crime, deliver a dramatic monologue, and bask in the glory of applause. The whole night was designed to make her feel like the star she usually was. The evening arrived, and everyone showed up in full costume. My friend Megan looked like a femme fatale straight out of a noir film, and even my usually grumpy neighbor Larry got into it, rocking a fake mustache as a sleazy club owner. The vibe was perfect. All that was missing was Ella. When she walked in and saw the setup, her face went blank. Not the delighted, "I'm surprised but touched" blank I was expecting. More like the, "I just found out my cat peed in my shoe" blank. She stood in the doorway, staring at the decorations and the cluster of costumed guests awkwardly sipping mocktails. "What is this?" she asked flatly. "It's a murder mystery dinner," I said, grinning like an idiot. "Surprise. You're the detective." Her brow furrowed. "You did all this for me?" "Yes. You've been feeling down, and I thought this would cheer you up." Ella blinked at me, her expression unreadable. Then, with an edge in her voice I didn't understand, she said, "Wow. You really think this is what I need right now?" The room fell silent. Megan pretended to examine her nails, and Larry coughed into his mustache. I stammered, I thought you'd enjoy it. You've always loved these things." Ella shook her head and gave a bitter laugh. "You don't get it, do you? I just lost my job. My whole life's a mystery I can't solve, and you think this game, is going to fix everything? It's like you're mocking me." My heart sank. "That's not what I meant at all. I just wanted to." "To what? Remind me how useless I feel? Make me play detective in a fake mystery because I can't figure out my real one?" She gestured to the room, the costumes, the carefully arranged clues. "This isn't for me. This is for you. So you can feel good about helping." The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to defend myself but realized I didn't know how. Had I really miscalculated that badly? I looked around at the guests, all avoiding eye contact, and suddenly felt absurd standing there in my pinstriped vest and fedora. Ella turned to leave, but then she paused in the doorway. Without looking back, she muttered, "Next time, just ask what I need." And then she was gone. The party limped along for another hour, but the energy was gone. The detective tried to salvage the night by solving the mystery himself, but even he seemed bored. By the end, I was left sitting in the ruins of my speakeasy, surrounded by half-eaten popcorn and abandoned feather boas, wondering where I'd gone so wrong. The thing is, I was trying. I really thought I was doing something meaningful, something that would bring a little light into Ella's life. But maybe she was right. Maybe this was more about me than her. I wanted her to be okay so badly that I didn't stop to think about what she actually needed. Now, I don't know if I should apologize, explain myself, or just leave her alone. Was I really so selfish for trying? AITA? Winning those tickets wasn't just luck. It felt cosmic. The kind of coincidence that makes you think the universe was finally playing nice. 2 spots to the Glass Realms experience, the hottest immersive theater event in the world. It was part performance, part puzzle solving, part escape room, and absolutely legendary. A secretive troupe of actors, a new city every week, and no one ever really knew what to expect. For months, I'd been stalking forums for spoilers. Apparently, there were hidden rooms, trapdoors, and scenes that only a handful of guests ever stumbled upon. People whispered about golden moments, private interactions with the actors that weren't in the main storyline. The thought of catching one of those made my pulse quicken. So when I won the tickets in a random online sweepstake, I was already envisioning myself unlocking the night's best-kept secrets. Corey, my partner, was equally thrilled but for very different reasons. "Finally," they said, spinning me around our kitchen after I told them the news. "A night of theater where I don't have to sit still or whisper." They were grinning so wide it looked like their face might break. "This is gonna be fun." Fun. I appreciated their enthusiasm, but this wasn't just fun to me. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Corey, on the other hand, seemed content to just show up. They hadn't even read the prep email with the list of optional clues or tips for engaging with the actors. When I tried to show them a fan-made guide to decoding prop symbols, they waved me off. "You're overthinking it," they said. "Why not just enjoy the surprises as they come?" "Because," I replied, holding up my phone like a professor unveiling a lecture slide, "the surprises are better if you're prepared. The more you engage, the deeper the experience. That's the whole point." "Or," Corey countered, "you spend so much time trying to win the night that you forget to enjoy it." It was one of those moments where we stared at each other, each fully convinced the other was missing the point, but we'd been together long enough to know when to pick our battles. We let it drop, for the moment. The night of the event, I insisted we arrive 2 hours early. The ticket confirmation mentioned an interactive prologue for those who showed up before doors officially opened. Corey grumbled but humored me, as usual. When we arrived, the venue was already buzzing. Actors in elaborate costumes roamed the line, dropping cryptic hints about what lay ahead. I was in heaven, scribbling notes and trying to piece together the puzzle. Corey, meanwhile, was trying to guess how tall the actors were beneath their masks. "That one's definitely wearing stilts," they whispered to me, pointing to a towering figure wrapped in ribbons. Once inside, the set design was breathtaking. Every room looked like it had been pulled straight from a dream. There was a ballroom with a rotating chandelier, a library with books that whispered secrets, and a garden that smelled faintly of lavender and ash. Every detail felt alive. I darted from room to room, following actors and eavesdropping on their conversations. At one point, I spotted a character in a velvet cloak disappearing behind a tapestry and dragged Corey after them. "This is it," I hissed. "Hidden storyline." But Corey tugged me in the opposite direction. "There's a puppet show starting in the main hall. Let's check it out." "A puppet show? That's probably for the casual crowd. We're here for the secret stuff." "And you don't think a puppet show could lead to something bigger?" They raised an eyebrow at me, the tiniest smirk on their face. "You're so busy chasing clues that you're ignoring what's right in front of you." I hesitated, torn. Corey's approach felt like squandering an opportunity, but I didn't want to spend the night arguing. Fine, I relented. But after this, we follow my lead. The puppet show was mesmerizing. The marionettes moved with eerie precision, their voices echoing as if they were speaking from inside your head. Corey was completely enraptured, while I kept scanning the crowd for hidden actors or props. And then, as the show ended, one of the puppets turned directly to us and said, "Follow the clockwork fox." Corey gasped audibly, and I froze. "See," they whispered, practically glowing. The puppet show was a clue. We spent the next hour chasing the clockwork fox, a mechanical creature that darted through the venue, its brass gears whirring softly. It led us to a hidden door disguised as a wine cabinet, and beyond it, a room that wasn't on the map. Inside, an actor dressed as a somber alchemist handed us a small vial of glowing liquid and whispered, "One sip each. Only together will the path reveal itself." I nearly exploded with excitement. Corey was grinning too, but their smile was softer, less triumphant. "This is incredible," I admitted as we downed the potion together. "I hate that you were right." "I wasn't right," Corey said, their voice teasing. "I just knew you were so focused on the big picture that you might miss the smaller pieces. But we're a team, remember? We balance each other out." The potion unlocked a series of riddles that led to more hidden rooms, more secrets. By the end of the night, we'd uncovered a subplot about a cursed heirloom and were even invited to a private epilogue scene with two of the lead actors. Walking out of the venue, my mind was still buzzing with everything we'd seen. "You were amazing in there," Corey said, nudging me as we waited for our rideshare. "I've never seen anyone dive into something like you do. I'd have missed half that stuff without you. And I would have ignored the puppet show if it weren't for you," I admitted. "Maybe we do make a good team." Corey grinned, throwing an arm around my shoulder. "Obviously, you're the brains, I'm the vibes." Still, I couldn't help wondering, was I too pushy at the start? Should I have let Corey set the tone instead of insisting on my way? Or did our different approaches make the night better for both of us? AITA? When I first heard about Bryce's promotion, I thought it was great news. "Congrats, man. Drinks on you now," I joked in the group chat, punctuating it with the requisite laughing emoji. Bryce responded with a string of exclamation marks and a screenshot of his official email. All caps, "VP of Sales, baby." Everyone chimed in with their congratulations, making the chat look like a ticker tape parade of well wishes. I left a thumbs-up reaction and moved on. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. Bryce and I had been close since college. He was my go-to drinking buddy, my partner in crime when it came to dodging responsibility or devising dumb but hilarious pranks. But over the years, his hustle to climb the corporate ladder had become a little excessive. Every conversation with him lately circled back to quarterly metrics, market share, and how he crushed his last presentation. It was like talking to a LinkedIn post. So, when the invite came, celebrating Bryce's big move, I didn't jump at the chance to RSVP. It was a formal dinner, black tie optional, at some fancy rooftop bar downtown. A few years ago, we'd have thrown a kegger in someone's backyard and called it a day. Now he was rubbing elbows with execs and expecting me to put on a suit. "Big night for Bryce," my girlfriend Sarah said, looking over the invite. "You going?" "Probably not," I replied, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. "It's just a promotion, not the moon landing. Plus, I'd have to dig out that suit you hate." Sarah frowned. "It's a big deal to him, though. You should go." I waved her off. "He'll have his work buddies there to gush over him. He won't even notice I'm not around." When the night came, I didn't even pretend to consider going. I ordered takeout and played video games, ignoring the steady buzz of the group chat lighting up with photos and comments about the event. One picture showed Bryce in a sharp navy suit, beaming, flanked by his colleagues. Another showed the skyline view from the rooftop. I closed the app and went back to my game, telling myself he wouldn't miss me. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Bryce. "Hey, didn't see you last night. Hope everything's okay." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed, erased, and retyped, finally settling on, "All good, just slammed with stuff. Looks like it was an awesome night. Congrats again." I thought that was the end of it, But when we met up for coffee a week later, I knew it wasn't. Bryce sat across from me, his usual easy grin replaced by something tighter, more forced. "So," he started, stirring his latte with the kind of intensity you'd use to churn butter, "you couldn't make it to the dinner?" I gave him my best, "work's been crazy" spiel, but he just nodded, his jaw clenched. "Look, man," he said, finally setting his spoon down, "I get it. You're not into the corporate stuff. But this wasn't just about the promotion. It was about, I don't know, having my people there. And you're supposed to be one of my people." His words hit like a sucker punch. I stammered something about being there in spirit, but he just shook his head. "In spirit?" he repeated, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "That's what people say when someone's dead, dude. You could have shown up for 2 hours, said, 'Congrats,' and bailed. It's not like I needed you to give a speech." I didn't know what to say. The Bryce I knew from college wouldn't have cared if I skipped a fancy dinner, but this Bryce clearly did. And it wasn't about the event itself. It was about me choosing not to show up for him. I told myself he wouldn't notice, but he had. "You've been weird about my job for a while," he added, his voice quieter now. "Like you think I've turned into some corporate robot or something. But this job means everything to me. It's not just a paycheck, it's what I've worked for. And it hurts that you can't see that." I sat there, stunned. He wasn't wrong. I had judged him, quietly dismissing his achievements because they didn't fit the laid-back image I'd clung to from our college days. Somewhere along the way, I decided that this new version of Bryce wasn't worth celebrating. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I screwed up. I should have been there." Bryce nodded but didn't say anything, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. We finished our coffee, and when we left, things still felt off. Not broken, but not fully mended, either. I don't know if an apology is enough to fix it. Part of me wonders if I've done permanent damage by underestimating how much that night meant to him. AITA? Sometimes I wonder if I should have just walked away when the idea came up, but I didn't. I trusted Evan like I trust a sibling, and now here I am, staring at a text that starts with, "I think it's unfair how you've been treating me." Let me back up. This all started with a food truck, or, more specifically, the idea of one. Evan and I have been friends since college. He's the dreamer, always with a wild new plan, and I'm the one who keeps his feet on the ground, or tries to. When he came to me with the idea of starting a gourmet grilled cheese truck, I thought it was one of his better ideas. He had it all sketched out. Funky recipes, a retro truck aesthetic, even the logo. But, as always, no funding. "You could get in on this," he said one night over beers. "We'd be partners. I just need a little help getting the truck." It wasn't a little help. It was $7,000. I wasn't swimming in cash, but I'd recently gotten a bonus at work and figured, why not? Evan was passionate. I'd get a percentage of the profits, and it sounded fun. Plus, grilled cheese. Everyone loves grilled cheese. He promised to pay me back within 6 months, with interest, once the truck took off. I felt like an investor on one of those startup shows. Exciting, right? For a while it was. We worked together on the menu. His idea of adding jam to a brie sandwich? Genius. I even helped paint the truck. It felt like we were building something special. And then, the truck launched. The first month was great. Long lines, glowing reviews on Instagram, and Evan texting me updates about how well we were doing. But then the vibe started to shift. I noticed he was hiring extra staff, buying fancy ingredients we hadn't discussed, and throwing pop-up events that cost more to host than they made. When I asked about repayment, he said, "Oh, it's all going back into the business right now. But we're killing it. Just give it a little more time." Time turned into 4 months, then 6. By month 8, my bonus was long gone, and the truck wasn't the cash cow Evan had promised. I started dropping heavier hints. "Any chance we can set up a payment schedule? Even something small?" Evan brushed me off, saying I'd get my money once the holidays passed and business picked up again. Meanwhile, I saw his Instagram stories. He was out at brunch with friends, upgrading his camera gear to take better food pics, and, this one really got me, posting from a weekend getaway in the mountains. The mountains. I wasn't asking him to live in poverty, but I couldn't shake the image of him sipping craft cocktails while my $7,000 floated away. Finally, I couldn't hold back anymore. I showed up at the truck one afternoon when he was packing up. "Hey," I started, trying to sound casual. "We need to talk about the loan." "Oh man, not now," he said, slamming the truck's rear door. "Evan, it's been almost a year," I pressed. "You promised 6 months. You're out here selling $12 sandwiches, and I'm still out $7,000. Can you at least explain what's going on?" He looked genuinely annoyed. "What's going on is I'm running a business. Do you think this is easy? Every cent I make goes back into this truck. You'll get your money when I have it." I tried to stay calm. "But you have money for brunch and mountain trips?" His face went red. "Oh, come on. What? Am I supposed to live like a hermit because of you? I have a life outside of this truck, okay?" That hit a nerve. "Because of me? Evan, I bankrolled this life outside the truck. You're acting like this is my fault, but you're the one who hasn't kept your word." The conversation spiraled from there, both of us saying things we probably shouldn't have. He accused me of micromanaging his dream, and I told him he had the financial responsibility of a goldfish. By the end, he stormed off, leaving me standing next to the truck, the smell of burnt cheese hanging in the air. After that, things got weird. Evan started avoiding me. He'd ignore my texts, dodge invites, and even change the locks on the truck so I couldn't get in for safety reasons. But I kept seeing those Instagram posts. Evan smiling with customers, announcing new specials, talking about the grind. I started leaving comments like, "Glad business is good. Maybe it's time to pay back your investors." Petty? Sure. Satisfying? Absolutely. He called me out on it during a group hangout. "Can we talk about how unprofessional you've been lately?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, like how unprofessional it is to borrow $7,000 and never pay it back?" I shot back. The room went silent. One of our friends awkwardly pretended to check their phone. Evan glared at me. "You're acting like you own me. I told you, you'll get your money when I have it." "Funny, you seem to have it for everything but me," I snapped. "Maybe sell one of those new cameras you're showing off." He stood up. "You're unbelievable. You think I'm not struggling too? Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your precious money, you'd see how hard this has been for me." He walked out, leaving me with a mix of anger, guilt, and embarrassment. The rest of the night was a blur, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something bigger than the money. The next day, he sent me the text, the one where he accused me of being unfair and unsupportive. Now, the truck's still rolling, Evan's still Evan, and I'm still $7,000 poorer. I don't know if I should have handled it differently, or if he should have. Did I cross the line by calling him out publicly? Was I too pushy? Or was I just standing up for myself? AITA? When Jamie and I signed up for the cooking class, we thought it'd be a great way to shake things up. A little culinary adventure, they called it, promising exotic flavors and the chance to cook alongside a local chef. The only catch was the secret menu. No one knew what we'd be making until the session began. Jamie loved the idea. Me? Not so much. Surprises and food? Risky business. The class was held in a quirky little loft tucked above an Asian spice market. The moment we walked in, I was hit with the heady scent of star anise, cardamom, and something smoky I couldn't quite place. A long wooden table in the middle of the room was strewn with mystery ingredients. Bundles of herbs, jars filled with unknown pastes, and what I'm pretty sure were fresh banana blossoms. There were no recipe cards, just a whiteboard that read in looping cursive, "You will create larb, a Laotian masterpiece." Larb? Jamie whispered, his brow furrowing. "That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie." "It's a meat salad," I said, dredging up some faint memory from a food blog I once skimmed. "It's supposed to be spicy, citrusy, really fresh." Jamie grinned. "Perfect. Let's make it weird." The chef, a wiry woman named Mai with arms like steel cables, clapped her hands to silence the room. "Larb is about balance," she said in a voice that commanded attention. "It is fiery but fresh, savory but bright. Follow my steps carefully, or not. The choice is yours. There is no right way, only delicious or not." Jamie's eyes lit up. I could already hear the gears turning in his head. I, however, clung to the follow my steps carefully part like a lifeline. Mai's instructions were intentionally sparse. She demonstrated briefly, tossing minced chicken into a hot pan, dousing it with lime juice, and sprinkling toasted rice powder like fairy dust. She didn't measure anything. Taste. Adjust. Repeat, she said, moving on to the next group. Jamie and I stood at our station, staring at the raw chicken and the vast array of ingredients. All right, I said, taking charge. We start by chopping the herbs, cilantro, mint, Thai basil. Equal parts. Jamie grabbed the herbs, sniffed them theatrically, then started ripping them apart with his hands. Equal parts? What are we, robots? I'm putting in extra basil. It's the Beyoncé of herbs. It says to chop them finely, I said, already reaching for the knife. Not maul them. He shrugged. Herbs taste the same no matter how you cut them. He dropped a fistful into the bowl, and I had to physically stop myself from fishing them out to redo them properly. I moved on to the toasted rice, carefully grinding it into a coarse powder with a mortar and pestle. Jamie, meanwhile, was squeezing limes directly into the pan with such vigor that seeds were flying everywhere. You're supposed to measure, I said, my voice higher than I intended. Who measures lime juice? He shot back. It's called intuition. Try it sometime. I gritted my teeth and focused on the chicken, stirring it methodically over the heat. Jamie, ever the mad scientist, was adding pinches of chili flakes, spoonfuls of fish sauce, and what looked suspiciously like a dollop of the tamarind paste meant for another dish. That's not part of larb, I said, pointing at the tamarind jar. It is now, he said, grinning like a kid caught sneaking candy. I'm calling it fusion larb. Fusion? You can't just... Relax, chef, step forward, he interrupted, clearly enjoying my mounting frustration. Cooking's about soul, not spreadsheets. My patience cracked. Cooking is about not poisoning people with your chaos, I snapped. A couple at the next station glanced over, but I ignored them. Jamie threw up his hands, mock offended. Chaos? That's hurtful. This is art. You'll thank me when it's amazing. It was like we were speaking different languages. For every careful adjustment I made, tasting, adding a drop more lime, a pinch more sugar, Jamie was doing the culinary equivalent of finger painting. At one point, he threw in some pomegranate seeds he'd found in a mystery bowl at the end of the table. Pomegranate? In larb? Why? I asked, staring at him like he'd grown a second head. For texture, he said smugly, as though he were the reincarnation of Escoffier. When we finally plated our larb, they looked like two entirely different species of food. Mine was modest and precise, the herbs evenly distributed, the chicken perfectly seasoned. Jamie's was, well, vibrant. Bits of pomegranate peeked out like tiny jewels, and the whole thing was crowned with a haphazard sprinkle of what I think was fried shallots. He'd also arranged lime wedges around the plate, for drama. The moment of truth came when my approach to taste our dishes. She tried mine first, nodding approvingly. Traditional, well-balanced, very good. I felt a smug sense of satisfaction. Then she tried Jamie's. She paused, her expression unreadable, and then took another bite. Unexpected, she said finally. Bold. Very bold. Jamie beamed. You hear that? Bold. She loves it. I gave a non-committal shrug and moved on. But Jamie was basking in the glory of her ambiguity like it was a Michelin star. Later, as we walked home with containers of our creations, the tension from earlier began to dissipate. Jamie reached into his box and popped a pomegranate seed into his mouth. You've got to admit, it's got personality. It's got something, I said, trying to suppress a smile. Come on, you liked it. I'll admit it was surprising. Surprising is good, he said, nudging me. Keeps things interesting. I sighed, shaking my head but laughing despite myself. Fine, but next time, we're sticking to the recipe. Deal, he said, then immediately added, but with just a little twist. As I bit into my perfectly traditional larb, I couldn't help but wonder, did I take it too seriously, or was Jamie just messing around too much? AITA? It began with the pigeons, or rather, their sudden disappearance. The rooftop garden had always been the pride of our building, a shared, sprawling terrace 8 stories above the chaos of the city, lush with planters of basil, lavender, and an ambitious attempt at dwarf cherry trees. It was equal parts sanctuary and social experiment. Each tenant was expected to care for the garden collectively, tending to their assigned areas while respecting the whole. For the last 6 months, it was just me and Priya. Everyone else had conveniently forgotten their responsibilities. The newlyweds on the 3rd floor blamed their honeymoon. The tech bro on 5 said his startup needed him 24/7. Even Mrs. Ortega, who used to be so diligent about the dahlias, claimed arthritis made it too painful to garden anymore. So, Priya and I picked up the slack, grumbling occasionally but bonding over dirt-streaked gloves and iced coffee breaks. Until the pigeons disappeared. One day, they were there, waddling around with their usual blend of indifference and arrogance. The next day, gone. Not a single coo or flutter of wings. Priya, ever the pragmatist, shrugged it off. Maybe someone put spikes on their balcony, she said, digging a hole for her marigolds. But I had a theory. I'd seen her up there. The newcomer. Apartment 8B. She was always in black, with a sun hat so enormous it looked like it might double as a satellite dish. She'd moved in a month ago and taken the farthest corner of the garden, the shadiest, gloomiest patch, and transformed it practically overnight. What had once been a sad planter of shriveled mint was now brimming with strange plants. Dark, waxy leaves, flowers that seemed to pulse faintly, vines that crept across the trellis as though alive. And then, the pigeons vanished. Maybe they don't like her plants, I said to Priya one evening as we watered the tomatoes. Priya raised an eyebrow. Don't start with your conspiracy theories. It's not a theory. I saw one of her vines eat a fly. It's called a Venus flytrap. They sell them at Home Depot. No, I said, lowering my voice. This vine moved. Like, it reached for the fly. Priya rolled her eyes, but the next time we were up there, she kept glancing at 8BS corner. Then came the incident with the compost bin. The terrace had one large communal bin, tucked behind the storage shed. Everyone was supposed to contribute scraps from their kitchens, and once a month, we'd use the rich, dark compost to feed the garden. Priya and I handled it last month, like always. But when I opened the bin this time, I nearly gagged. It was full of ash. Fine, gray ash, like something had been burned. And there was a smell, sharp, metallic, like overheated wires. Maybe it's charcoal, Priya said when I dragged her over to see. Charcoal doesn't smell like this. Then ask her, Priya said, gesturing toward the shadowy corner. She's probably using it for her plants. But I didn't ask. Something about 8B unnerved me. I didn't like the way she never acknowledged us, not even with a nod. I didn't like how her plants seemed to whisper in the breeze, even when the air was still. And then Priya stopped helping. At first, it was little things. Skipping watering duty, forgetting to refill the bird bath. I've got finals, she'd text, or work's insane. But then it became obvious she was avoiding the garden entirely. When I confronted her, she shrugged. What's the point? No one else cares. Let 8B have her creepy little forest. She's taking over, I hissed. Haven't you noticed? Her plants are spreading. It's a garden, Priya said flatly. Plants grow. Get over it. But I couldn't get over it. Not when I found one of her vines creeping into my section, its tendrils curling around my chives. Not when the compost bin started filling with ash every week. And especially not when I noticed my parsley wilting overnight, as though something was draining the life out of it. So, I decided to fight back. One night, armed with a pair of scissors and a flashlight, I snuck up to the terrace. My plan was simple. Cut her vines, create a clear boundary, and maybe sprinkle a little vinegar around to keep them from creeping back. But when I got there, I froze. Her corner was glowing. The plants gave off an eerie green light, faint but unmistakable. The flowers pulsed, their petals opening and closing like breathing lungs. And in the center of it all stood 8B, her hands buried in the soil. I stepped closer, trying not to make a sound. But then one of the vines turned toward me. It moved like a snake, uncoiling itself and slithering across the ground. I stumbled backward, dropping the scissors. "What are you doing?" she asked without turning around. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the night like a knife. I stammered something about pruning, about boundaries. "You've neglected your section," she said, still not looking at me. "Your plants are dying. Because of you," I snapped. "Your vines are choking them." "My plants grow where they're needed," she said simply, "where the care has been abandoned." That's when I noticed something else. Her plants weren't just in my section. They were everywhere, spreading into the lavender, the tomatoes, even the empty planters that used to belong to Mrs. Ortega. I ran. The next morning, Priya and I argued. I told her what I'd seen. She accused me of being dramatic. "Maybe if you actually took care of your plants, hers wouldn't be taking over," she said. "And maybe if you hadn't given up entirely, we wouldn't be in this mess." Now the garden is a battlefield. I've tried cutting her vines, but they grow back faster than I can prune. Priya won't help, claiming it's not her problem anymore. 8B says nothing, but her plants keep spreading, their eerie glow visible even during the day. AITA for letting this happen? Or is it Priya for abandoning me? Or maybe, is it something else entirely? The asphalt shimmered like a river of black glass under the early morning sun, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined I was steering a spaceship through the void. Commuting always felt like some strange odyssey. Each car was a starship, each lane a trajectory, and each driver a mix of benevolence or menace. Most mornings, I could tell which was which at a glance. Today, though, the lines blurred. I was in the middle lane, my mind swimming through the usual fog of half-wakefulness and caffeine starvation. My exit loomed ahead, and instinct kicked in. The car in the right lane was sluggish, its blinker an impotent flash of indecision. Perfect. I could glide past it, switch lanes, and make my exit in one seamless motion. Then, like a shark sensing prey, the car surged forward, blocking me. The break-in rhythm felt like a slap. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, the familiarity of irritation rising like an old companion. But irritation turned to disbelief when I glanced to my right and caught a flash of something unexpected. It was her, my wife. She was grinning, her face radiant with an unfiltered joy that didn't belong in the arena of morning traffic. Her hair framed her face like she'd stepped out of a dream, and she was waving like a kid who just saw a celebrity. For a moment, I was dumbfounded. How had she ended up in my orbit on this vast, tangled highway? My brain short-circuited between surprise, confusion, and the ghost of annoyance still clinging to me. I didn't wave back. I couldn't. The moment felt too surreal, like breaking the fourth wall in my carefully scripted morning routine. Her smile faltered as my face remained fixed in its stony mask. Then, as the road demanded my attention again, she drifted behind me, absorbed into the swarm of vehicles. My exit was coming up fast. I made it, barely, but the moment clung to me like the scent of rain-soaked pavement. When I got to work, my phone buzzed with a message. So, no wave, no smile, nothing. I stared at the text for a long time, searching for a reply that wouldn't make things worse. I settled on silence, my old standby. The day moved on, dragging its hours like heavy chains. But by evening, her disappointment filled the room before she even said a word. It was in the way her movements were clipped, her laughter quieter, her usual sparkle dimmed. Finally, over dinner, she let the words tumble out. "Why didn't you wave?" she asked, her voice softer than I expected. "I didn't know what to do," I admitted. "You caught me off guard. And honestly, it was kind of reckless, don't you think? Speeding up like that?" Her eyes widened, disbelief flickering across her face. "Reckless? I was just excited to see you. You acted like I was some random stranger trying to ruin your morning." "You kind of were," I said, regretting it as soon as the words left my mouth. "I mean, not you, just the situation. It threw me off." She looked at me like I'd missed the point entirely, and maybe I had. "I wasn't trying to throw you off. I was trying to connect with you. Is that so bad?" It hit me then, a realization like a punch to the gut. To her, it wasn't about the traffic, the timing, or the logistics. It was about a fleeting moment she'd wanted to make special, a spark she tried to light, only for me to douse it without even realizing. I apologized, clumsily, and she accepted. But the air between us felt like a wound still healing. The next morning, I left home earlier than usual, determined to find her on the road. It felt absurd, like hunting for a specific raindrop in a storm, but luck or fate seemed to be on my side. As I approached my usual exit, there she was, her car in the lane beside mine. My heart leaped into my throat. This time, I honked, rolled down my window, and waved with the enthusiasm of a man trying to make up for a mistake. Her face lit up, her surprise melting into laughter. We drove side by side for a moment, two ships on the same trajectory, before the road split us apart. As I navigated the rest of my commute, a strange warmth lingered in my chest. The road didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a bridge, one I'd nearly missed but managed to cross just in time. The phone call came at an inconvenient time. Not that there was ever a good moment to get a favor-demanding call from my brother, but catching me on the tail end of cleaning up a glitter explosion in my living room felt particularly cruel. My daughter, Ellie, had gotten creative with an art project, and the living room now shimmered like a Vegas casino. As I wedged my phone between my ear and shoulder, I half-heartedly scraped glitter off the coffee table with a spatula. "Luce," my brother Nick began, his voice sliding into that honeyed tone he always used when he wanted something. "You're gonna love this opportunity to be a hero." Hero? Great. That usually meant trouble. He launched into an elaborate tale of how his food truck, the Wandering Fork, had been selected to cater a high-profile music festival 3 hours away. It was a big break, he explained. A chance to put his name on the map. The only hitch? His sous chef had bailed at the last minute, leaving him one body short for the weekend. I didn't even bother pretending to misunderstand where this was going. "Nick, you know I can't leave Ellie for a weekend. Who would watch her?" He huffed dramatically, as if the solution were obvious. "Bring her. She can hang out backstage or something. It'll be fun." Ellie was 7 years old. She would not hang out backstage. She would wander off, befriend a feral raccoon, and come back covered in mud and bad decisions. I didn't say this, but Nick had a way of bulldozing logic with enthusiasm. I didn't have the energy to wrestle him. "I really can't," I said, trying to keep my tone firm but kind. "Ellie's got a soccer game Saturday morning, and I've been planning this science fair project with her for weeks. I don't want to let her down." Nick groaned, dragging out the sound like a teenager denied the car keys. "You're seriously telling me a kid's soccer game is more important than helping me secure my future?" I could feel my grip on the spatula tightening. "Nick, I'm a single mom. My time isn't exactly overflowing. I have to prioritize, Ellie. And you don't think I'm prioritizing something important here? This festival could change everything for me." I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. This was the thing with Nick. He was always chasing something. An acting gig, a startup idea, a wild scheme to build the next Airbnb for iguanas, and every pursuit was framed as life or death. I'd bailed him out before, helped him move, lent him money, even worked at his truck once when he pulled his back lifting a fryer. And I'd done it willingly because he was my brother, and I loved him. But I couldn't keep sacrificing my life to fuel his, especially now, when Ellie needed me more than ever. "I want to help," I said, and I meant it. "But this weekend isn't possible. Maybe I can help you find someone else? I know a couple of people who've worked in kitchens." He cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Right, someone else. Because they'd totally understand the vision, Luce. You know how picky my clients are. They need perfection." "Nick," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I can't drop everything. That's not fair to Ellie, and it's not fair to me." There was a long pause, heavy with unspoken recriminations. When he finally spoke, his voice had a cold edge I didn't recognize. "Wow, guess I shouldn't be surprised. You always choose your little world over supporting me." That stung. I closed my eyes, trying to summon calm, but my patience was fraying. "That's not true, and you know it. I've been over backward for you more times than I can count. But this is different. I have responsibilities." "Yeah, well, I hope your glitter and soccer games are worth it," he snapped, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, wondering if I should have said something differently or tried harder to find a compromise. But then Ellie bounded into the room, her curls bouncing as she held up a tiny volcano made of clay and vinegar. "Mom, watch it erupt." I followed her into the kitchen and crouched next to her as she poured red food coloring into the vinegar. Her grin widened as the volcano fizzed and bubbled, spilling pink foam onto the table. "Awesome, right?" she said, her eyes sparkling. "Awesome," I echoed, smiling despite myself. I thought about Nick's accusation, his claim that I always chose my little world over him. Maybe he was right, but this little world was everything to me. Ellie was everything. And maybe Nick couldn't see that, but I wasn't going to apologize for it. A few days later, I saw Nick's latest Instagram post. It was a dramatic selfie in front of his food truck, captioned, "When family won't step up, you do it yourself." The comments were full of people cheering him on, calling him a warrior, a dreamer. I didn't comment. I didn't even like the post. I still don't know if I made the right choice. AITA? The first thing I remember about the house was the way it seemed alive, not in the haunted, horror movie sense, but in the way it breathed with the wind and sighed with the rain. The creaks in the floorboards were distinct, conversational almost. The peeling wallpaper whispered secrets from eras long past. I was 10 when my parents bought it, an old Victorian with a turret that I swore held ghosts. They laughed and called it my overactive imagination. Years later, that house became my sanctuary. When I moved back after my divorce, it wrapped me in a kind of melancholy warmth. My mom, always practical, asked me if I'd be okay living alone in a place so big and old. I told her I'd never really be alone here. The house didn't allow for it. The first sign that the house really was alive came on a Tuesday evening. I was pouring myself a glass of wine in the kitchen when I heard a muffled voice. It wasn't coming from the street or the radio, both of which were silent. It was coming from the walls. "About time," it said, low and rumbling. The wine glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the counter. I stood there, frozen, staring at the cracked plaster of the kitchen wall. I wanted to believe it was a figment of my imagination. Stress, maybe, or the wine I hadn't even sipped yet. But then it spoke again. "You're back." The voice wasn't threatening, not exactly. It sounded resigned, like an old man waking from a long nap. I found myself responding before I even thought it through. Yes? Who's there?" There was a long pause. Then the wall sighed. "No one," it said. "And everyone." Now, any reasonable person would have packed a bag and fled, but curiosity has always been my vice. I stayed. Over the next few days, the voice became part of my routine. It only ever spoke from the walls, never the floors, the ceiling, or the windows. Always the walls. It complained about the rain, waxed poetic about the moonlight, and grumbled about the pigeons nesting in the turret. "What do you want?" I finally asked one night as I sat cross-legged in the living room, staring at the cracked plaster. "To be remembered," it said simply. The answer puzzled me. Remembered by whom? For what? But every time I tried to press, the voice grew quiet. Weeks passed, and I stopped questioning it. The voice became a companion, a presence that felt as much a part of the house as the creaky stairs or the drafty windows. Then came the dreams. They started small, flickers of scenes I couldn't place. A woman in a long dress sweeping the turret stairs, a man hammering a nail into the very wall that now spoke to me. The dreams grew more vivid, and soon, I wasn't sure if they were mine at all. One night, I dreamt of a fire. I woke up gasping, the smell of smoke lingering in my nostrils. I ran downstairs, expecting to find flames licking at the furniture, but the house was silent, its shadows still and patient. "You saw it," the voice said when I returned to my room. "The fire?" I asked, my heart still racing. "Yes, the end." The voice told me its story that night. The house had once been home to a family, the Bells. A mother, a father, 2 young daughters. They were happy, until they weren't. The father had taken to drinking. The mother had taken to crying. One night, after a particularly bad fight, the father had knocked over an oil lamp. The flames had consumed the house, and with it, the family. Only the house remained, rebuilt over their ashes. "I am them," the voice said, "and they are me." It was a lot to process, but I didn't run. If anything, I felt a strange kinship with the voice. I, too, was made of old scars and half-healed wounds. I stayed. The house began to change after that night. The whispers turned to laughter. The turret, once filled with pigeons, became a quiet retreat where I could sit and watch the stars. The walls seemed warmer, the floors sturdier. The house, it seemed, was healing. And so was I. One morning, I woke to find a box on the kitchen table. It was small, wooden, and covered in a thin layer of dust. Inside were photos of the Bell family, smiling, carefree, alive. There was also a letter, brittle and yellowed with age. It was addressed to whomever comes next. It was a simple plea, remember us? I framed the photos and hung them in the hallway. The house seemed to hum with approval. Years later, when I finally decided to sell the house, I made sure to tell the new owners its story. It's alive, I told them, only half joking. They laughed, just as my parents had. But I knew the house would take care of them, as it had me. As I drove away for the last time, I swear I heard it sigh. Not a mournful sound, but a contented one. It was no longer asking to be remembered. It already was. Kevin had been on this weird kick lately. Let's do something spontaneous and life-changing kind of thing. It started innocently enough. Late night Googling about buying a kayak or signing up for salsa classes. But then, one particularly drizzly Tuesday, he showed me a photo of a sad-eyed rescue parrot named Mango. The bird had a tattered wing, a feisty beak, and a backstory straight out of a melodrama. Abandoned at an airport, adopted briefly by a magician, then returned because he didn't fit the act. Kevin's voice sparkled with enthusiasm. It's fate. Mango needs us. I squinted at the photo. Kevin, do we need Mango? Of course we do. Think about it. A parrot. They're smart. They can talk. They're low maintenance. Low maintenance? I cut him off. This is a bird that outlived a magician. That screams high-maintenance drama. Come on, he coaxed. He could be like our mascot, our quirky third roommate. And because Kevin had that persistent twinkle in his eye, and because I'm weak when it comes to living beings with sad eyes, I agreed. I even let Kevin handle the paperwork, which, in hindsight, was mistake number one. The first few days, Mango was a lot. He screamed at 7 a.m. like he was auditioning for the lead role in a horror movie. He threw sunflower seeds everywhere. His cage looked like a crime scene, and his favorite pastime was imitating the sound of my phone alarm until I wanted to throw the thing out the window. But Kevin? Kevin was in love. He cooed at Mango, fed him fresh fruit, and spent hours trying to teach him to say, "Who's a good boy?" But like most of Kevin's hobbies, the novelty wore off after about a week. One morning, I came downstairs to find Mango shrieking at an empty food bowl. Kevin was sprawled on the couch, one sock half off, scrolling TikTok. I glared at him. Kevin, Mango's hungry. He waved a hand lazily. I'll get to it. I'm just decompressing. You mean procrastinating? No, he said, with the conviction of a man who absolutely was procrastinating. I'm bonding with him emotionally first. Bonding. Right. So, I fed Mango, and I cleaned his cage, and I dealt with the fact that he had developed a hobby of dive-bombing my hair every time I sat on the couch. The weeks rolled on, and Kevin grew increasingly detached from his quirky third roommate. Meanwhile, Mango's antics escalated. He learned how to mimic the sound of Kevin's voice, which he mostly used to scream, "You're doing great," at inappropriate times, like when I was trying to hold a work Zoom meeting. He also figured out how to unlatch his cage and terrorize my plants. When I confronted Kevin about it, he shrugged. Mango's just being Mango. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, you'd enjoy him more. Uptight? The word echoed in my head as I stood there, hair full of feathers and one sock mysteriously missing. Mango's work, no doubt. I tried to keep my cool. Kevin, this was your idea. You wanted Mango. You said you'd take care of him. And I do take care of him, Kevin replied. I just think you're overreacting. Birds are independent. Independent? I snapped. He's eating my basil plant right now. Kevin had the audacity to laugh. Maybe he's a foodie. The breaking point came one afternoon when I arrived home to find Mango perched on the ceiling fan, spinning like a drunk acrobat. Kevin wasn't even home. He'd left Mango out of his cage for enrichment while he went to grab coffee. Enrichment? My ass? Mango had pooped on the TV, chewed a hole in my favorite sweater, and discovered a way to screech that felt like it was aimed directly at my soul. I spent half an hour trying to lure him down with crackers while he mocked me in Kevin's voice. "You're doing great." When Kevin finally returned, iced latte in hand, I unleashed all the frustration I'd been holding back. "Do you have any idea what Mango's been up to while you were out pretending this isn't your responsibility? He's destroying the apartment, Kevin, and I'm the one stuck cleaning up after him every single time." Kevin blinked at me, completely unfazed. "You're overreacting. He's a parrot, not a toddler." "That's exactly the problem," I shouted. "He's not a toddler. He's a living, breathing, screeching creature that you brought into this house, and you're not even trying to take care of him." Kevin set his latte down slowly, like he was about to deliver some great wisdom. "Look, maybe Mango just vibes better with you. You're nurturing. I'm like the cool uncle." I couldn't believe my ears. "Kevin, you don't get to be the cool uncle to a bird. This isn't a part-time gig." We argued until Mango, now thoroughly overstimulated, started screeching louder than both of us combined. I retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me, while Kevin muttered something about me being too dramatic. That night, I lay in bed listening to Mango's occasional squawks and Kevin's oblivious laughter as he binged some show in the living room. The next morning, I found Mango curled up in his cage, his feathers looking a little less shiny than usual. It hit me then. Our chaos, our negligence was affecting him. He wasn't just a quirky third roommate. He was a living being who didn't ask to be part of our dysfunctional little duo. I sat Kevin down, and we had the talk. The kind where I laid out exactly how much effort it took to keep Mango healthy and happy and made him admit he hadn't been pulling his weight. To my surprise, he actually looked guilty. "I guess I didn't realize how much work he was," Kevin admitted. "I just thought it'd be easier." "Well, it's not," I replied. "But if we're keeping him, we need to do better. Together." Kevin agreed, and we came up with a plan to divide the responsibilities. I didn't trust him to stick to it entirely, but it was a start. Mango deserved better, and I was determined to make sure he got it, even if it meant being the uptight one. Still, as I cleaned another poop stain off the couch that evening, I couldn't help but wonder, was I really overreacting? Or was Kevin just a clueless man-child who didn't deserve the magical chaos of Mango? AITA,